Let's talk about an Iron Dome. Do we need one? Dr. Alan Mendoza is Executive Director at the Henry Jackson Society, Robert Clark, Director of the Defence and Security Unit at Civitas. Gentlemen, what do you think?
The question of an Iron Dome system for the UK, I think, misses a lot of the questions why it's specific for Israel. Obviously, we've seen a lot of pressure on Israel recently and Ukraine by extension in terms of their air defences, and then by further extension, the UK and our preparedness to match the similar threat. The difference is Israel's threat is a lot different to the UK's. There was an excellent article last week written by John Foreman, who's a former British defence attaché, and he rightly highlights that Israel's specific geographical and geopolitical interests deem that iron threat is actually particularly pertinent to Israel, and it just wouldn't really work with the UK. We're at the western periphery of a continent, we're relatively well isolated, and we have incredible breadth and depth across Western Europe and NATO. Israel lacks all strategic depth, which is why Iron Dome is particularly pertinent to them.
Doctor?
Well, I would take a slightly different point. I mean, Rob's obviously right that Israel faces a specific set of circumstances. But Iron Dome, of course, is a catch-all for several different defence systems. You've got Arrow, which is for the ballistic missiles, and in fact intercepted a missile in outer space, which was fascinating in itself. You then saw, of course, David Sling that deals with the cruise missiles and drones. And then you've got Iron Dome that deals with the rockets. Now, we don't need the rocket bit, but we certainly need an integrated defence system in the UK that can work together to take on the types of threats that we've seen, not simply from Iran, which of course menaced Israel recently and has threatened us, but also Russia, which regularly deploys similar methods against Ukraine. So do we need integrated defence like Iron Dome, the whole system? I think we do.
Well, the integrated air and missile defence system that Alan mentions is rightly needed. However, it operates completely different to Iron Dome. The other key capability gap that we're not looking here really is the reinforcement of the UK's existing air defence systems. Israel, by definition, is an incredibly small landmass, and in terms of the short-range, short-threat rocket and artillery threat that it faces against Iranian proxies, we just don't have the same threat matrix. We need to look more at investing in our Royal Navy frigates and destroyers, which needs increased defence industrial capability, and increasing the technology in which that's going to fulfil those very specific defence needs. Dragonfire, for example, on the frigates and destroyers, that needs to be brought forward from 2027 to a much sooner date, and that will increase our preparedness and air defence drastically more than an Israeli-style Iron Dome system, for instance.
I'm going to agree with my former colleague to a point, but I'm going to say that the problem we have with our current systems are that they're excellent, but they don't work together, and they also defend certain bits of kit. So, for example, we've got ship-based systems that defend ships. We've got truck-based systems that defend land. We've got air-based systems that defend the air. What we don't have is a system that defends the UK per se, and were we ever in a situation where we would need to have our forces sent abroad for whatever reason, that would leave us somewhat naked at home. So I think the point is to try and develop an umbrella shielding system of some kind to cover the homeland that's independent of these other systems, but which does work together.
Covering the homeland is actually a really good point, and it's something that's actually missed in the debate. Again, going back to Iron Dome and the parallels or the similarities and therefore the differences, Iron Dome only covers around 60 square miles. That includes 10 batteries. We barely have 5 batteries of Sky Sabre. So instead of an Iron Dome system that's only relevant for about 60 square miles, i.e. London and the South East at a push, we really need to include air defence systems that incorporate the actual threat from Russia in particular, from submarines and their long-range air defence from the north. So that includes mainly northern Scotland, the eastern coast of England and Northern Ireland for the gaps around the sort of high north and the Arctic, where the Russian threat operates from, not so much the southeast and the NATO landmass, where an Iron Dome system would cover, for instance, London. We need to think much more further and how to include the whole of the UK.
Landmass is the point.
Well, yeah, look, we can't cover everything in one sense because the cost would be extreme. But I think some of the key points, the key defensive areas, plus also infrastructure. We've seen the Russians, for example, heavily target Ukrainian infrastructure, power plants, even nuclear facilities. Now, we've got nuclear facilities. We do not want those to be susceptible to a long-range threat. And while our current systems are good, if you can prepare them,
yeah.
You need to be prepared for a surprise attack these days as well.
But aren't cyber threats also something that we should consider, especially when it comes to things like nuclear capability?
Of course you should. But what we're trying to do is develop a holistic defence that covers every possibility. If we don't have that, we're not really defending the homeland.